So tonight's speaker is, I think, a familiar face to most of you, so I won't read the full bio on his website, although it is good. Evan Glass is an at-large member of the County Council. He was elected first in 2018, but his long-standing Silver Spring roots before that. He was involved in the chair of the advisory board for a few years.
Evan Glass is an at-large member
The 2010s. Evan's been a great advocate for transit and causes that cares about generally last 7 years or something. The county council, like I say, he's chair of the Transportation Environment Committee. So he's chair of the committee through which many of the areas of active interest pass through. He's also on the Economic Development Committee. He helped spearhead the effort to expand the council to 11 members through the ballot initiative in 2022. Before that was 9. And he also was a big proponent of public financing, public campaign financing, and many other great achievements. So I'll turn the floor over to Evan, and please help me welcome him here.
That worked. Great. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Thank you for coming out. I know it is a misty and wet evening, but always glad to come and talk with you all. I think this is becoming an annual tradition in December or so to speak with you. And Sean, thank you for your leadership. You know, he knew my bio from heart because I think he wrote it. Because this is a homecoming. Sean used to work with me. You know, when he was at the council, he was the T&E staffer to then Councilmember Tom Hucker, and then came to my office and became my lead transportation and environment staffer. So much of the accomplishments he rattled off, he was there and part of making those accomplishments. So thank you, Sean. Ben, thank you for your steadfast leadership, and congratulations to everybody who's been nominated to the board or who wants to serve on a committee. We need you. I need you, and the community needs you. And so thank you much. Thank you very much. So what I'd love to do is just maybe rattle off a few updates and accomplishments county-wide, and then we can do a deeper dive into maybe some Q&A. I don't know how much time you want from me, but let me start off with a really big accomplishment that I think has gone a little under the radar because of the timing. This is December. There was other issues that have taken over the news over the last 5-6 weeks. But want you to know that we are making our roads safer here in Montgomery County. If you missed the announcement about a week or two ago, our traffic fatal crashes from road issues regarding pedestrians and vehicles is down 11% from pre-pandemic levels, which is huge. That means everything that we have been working toward, everything that you've been advocating for is working. And I know it hasn't been easy, right? Bike lanes, sidewalks, speed cameras, red light cameras, all of these things are making our roads safer. And it just so happens that 1 year ago, I passed my Safe Streets Act, which did 4 things to make our roads safer. Among them, it prohibits right turn on reds in our downtown areas. So it's mostly Silver Spring, Bethesda, and Wheaton. And we need our state partners to widen that out so it includes state highways and other parts of the county as well. It increased the time that pedestrians can utilize to cross the streets. So leading pedestrian intervals, LPIs, it increased that timing because we know that nearly 2/3 of all of the incidents that occur regarding pedestrians are at intersections. They're not people who are jaywalking or people who are playing Frogger across a main road. They're at intersections, which is why we emphasized making our intersections safer. And then 2 other aspects. One, making sure that our kids can safely get to and from school, one of our most sacred responsibilities here in local government. And so if there is ever an incident involving a student or a family while they're walking to or from school, we will immediately do a design study for that area to improve it and make sure that no child is hit again in that particular school cluster or school area. And then the 4th aspect that the bill did that we're still waiting on is increasing our automated enforcement. We know that red light cameras and speed cameras are colorblind as to who the driver may be. So if you're driving fast, you get a ticket. And we know that it proves to have worked. And what we need to do now is get the state to grant us the authority to have more red light cameras and speed cameras. So action item for your committees, lobby the state. And I will tell you that over the last year, there has been some change in leadership within the Montgomery County delegation. The new leader for traffic issues is Delegate Vaughn Stewart. He and I have met a number of times over the last number of months, and I am very excited for his leadership, and I expect that there will be an expansion of our cameras and ability to do that. Ben, you want to hold on? Yeah. There you go. Right. So he knows that he knows what to do, and he's going to do the right thing. So that is something that should be on your radar, and you might want to touch base with him to see what legislative actions are in work. But we need the ability to have more cameras here, and he's going to help us do that. So that is making our roads safer, right? Again, headline is 11% reduction in incidents in Montgomery County, restoring us to the pre-pandemic levels, and we have to do more. Because the reality is in 2024, even with those good numbers, we still had, I'm looking at the number right here, 398 pedestrians who were hit, 117 cyclists who were hit, 34 scooters involved in crashes, and 14 people who've tragically been killed. And that has not been updated for the end of November and clearly December with the weather and the lighting issues that we have. So I expect those to increase, but we are still making progress, and they are lower than they have been. A few other issues I'll share with you. Bicycle and pedestrian, BIPAs, the bicycle and pedestrian priority areas. We're making a lot of progress, particularly here in Silver Spring, where the cycle track and the floating bus stops are continuing. And there will be a secure bike facility that is built, and that is expected to be built and completed, or at least ground broken in 2025. So in a few months, we'll have another bicycle facility so that people can safely store their bikes here in Montgomery, here in Silver Spring. In Wheaton and Glenmont, there are more greenways and cycle tracks that are proposed. And then in the Tacoma Langley Park area, they are some separated bike lanes that are under design. Can you hold your question for a sec? We'll come back to all this. I just want to rattle off some of the things I know that you care about. Purple Line. What's the status of the Purple Line? Yes, Tina, I know. 1 block from your house. I know. So the Purple Line area right down Wayne Avenue by Silver Spring International Middle School, right down the block from Tina and Don's house, the tracks have been laid, which is wonderful. I will tell you that particular area along Wayne Avenue, my inbox was flooded all summer. My colleagues' inboxes were flooded all summer, and that says nothing of individual interactions in social media as well. But there's a reason why this summer was disruptive, because work was being done, and it was being done at the fastest and most expansive pace in the nearly 20 years that we've been at it, right? And we know the advocacy for the Purple Line has been going on longer than that, but since the project was initially funded and approved, this was the summer of progress, and it was disruptive, but we've gotten over the hump. So much so that 72% of the entire project is complete. Utility relocation is at 92% completion. And then one last statistic, the system and station construction is only at 22%, but that comes after everything else has been laid. The tracks, the utilities, and other aspects. So we're at 22% station construction. And then along that same thought, I know that there have been some residents in Silver Spring who've taken to social media to try to encourage all of us to frequent the businesses because they are hurting. Kefa Cafe is hurting. Mandalay is hurting. All of those along Bonifant are hurting, but it's the reason why we included $900,000 in grants in this budget which are being dispersed to mostly those businesses, because it really is unfair that they basically have to stop doing everything because people are not walking by, there are no cars, there's not even a purple line just yet. So people think they're closed, but they're not. So let's send some of our holiday good cheer that way, and utilize and patronize some of those businesses. Two more things I'll share, and then we can open it up for questions. Bus rapid transit. So the bus rapid transit primarily right now on Route 29, the most progressed route throughout the entire county. We are currently in phase 2, which means the engineering for Colesville Road, and that engineering will include median lanes. That was essentially the last decision of the last council, and that prior Transportation and Environment Committee, which was Tom Hucker, Han Dreamer, and myself. We decided that if we want true BRT on 29, it needs to have a median dedicated lane, and that's what's moving forward. So right now we're in the engineering phase, which should end next year, 2025. But the financing for what comes next remains a question mark. The state budget of a $1 billion deficit for transportation funding is real. We don't know how to close that. The county executive has lots of thoughts about how we raise money for bus rapid transit specifically, but before any of that is enacted or allowed by the state, right now we're trying to figure out what to do and how to build out BRT, not only on 29, but then we got Veers Mill Road, we got 355, which is going to be 3 segments, the south segment, the mid segment, and the northern Montgomery County segment. And so all of those are in various design phases, but the actual funding for laying the groundwork remains a question mark. And so we're going to have to figure that out, not only as a county, but we're going to need the state to help us figure that out as well. Last thing I'll say is, talk a lot about the transportation side of the portfolio of T&E. There's the environmental aspect as well, and we know all of this is interlaced, right? In order to have a clean environment, we need more public transportation. We need to get we need to get more single occupancy vehicles off the road. But we have a number of transit projects that are green. We have we recently won some national recognition for our bus depot. How many of you have been to our bus depot here in Silver Spring? You might want to do a field trip. I'm going to throw that out. When the new board gets constituted, maybe you do a site visit or a site meeting in the summer or in the spring so that you all can see the incredible work that we're doing here in Montgomery County to have green buses that have our own green refueling facility, and it's right here off of Grubb Road and East West Highway, so it's not far from here. But that's down county. We have added money to the capital budget to do another green fuel facility in Up County near Gaithersburg, near Shady Grove Road, and that is actually going to be a hydrogen fuel station for more buses, and it's mind-blowing. If you are not aware of that, Google it. You'll see some of the T&E committee work and some of the DGS work from the county. But what we're projecting to happen there is a bus depot, the hydrogen fueling station, and it's the good type of hydrogen, not the bad type of hydrogen. And then there is work in progress to get rid of the MCPS bus depot across the street in Shady Grove Road. So the vision of having transit-oriented development at the Shady Grove Metro is happening. That whole area in the next decade or so will be transformed, and it's going to be awesome. I'm excited about it. There's a lot of work to do. It still will cost a lot of money to make those things happen, but there is agreement. The plans have been laid, and now we just have to work through a number of budget cycles to be able to continue laying that work and seeing all of this come to fruition. So I'm excited about what's happening. It is a direct outgrowth of your advocacy, and I'm not minimizing that. The work and advocacy that you all do has gotten a majority, if not a supermajority, of the council and the county executive to recognize how important all these things are. People want to continue moving to Montgomery County because of the walkability, because of the environmental impact that we're making, and because of the transit infrastructure. So with that, I'll stop talking, and then I'll just kind of go around the room if anyone has any more specific questions. Does that work, Sean? Or do you want to pass that around?
Yeah, we'll pass this microphone around. Kathy, you can assist
Great.
with the mic passing. So
Great. Thank you,
online.
Kathy.
Our millions watching at home can hear the. Should be on.
Yep, it's on.
You can call.
Great. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Jeff Wahara. I read a report recently that Maryland is one of the exurb capitals of the United States. Exurbs is beyond suburbia, and they kind of said that supporting those neighborhoods are the bus rapid transit systems. We build them way far away, and then we support it with bus rapid systems. And I was wondering how we can change that idea to make more down county infill, like you're saying. We need to do the smart growth down county as opposed to extending way far away with rapid bus. How are we going to change that?
Yeah, so thank you for that question, Jeff. And so there's a few different aspects of your question. I haven't seen the report about us being, you said, okay. Well, I don't believe everything I see on the internet, but it is true that in Montgomery County, we are urban, we are suburban, we are exurban, and we're rural. We have farms. So we are all of those things, and people utilize our services differently. It's one of the reasons why over the last year and a half, the Department of Transportation has been undergoing what they call the Ride-On Reimagined. The Ride-On system and its dozens of bus lines have really not changed over the last 3 decades. But growth here has increased more than 50%. It's basically doubled over that 30 years, which is why I led the effort to increase the council, because more people needed more representation. But with regard to buses, as we've had new development and transit-oriented development and suburban development, we need to make sure that our bus routes reflect the Montgomery County of today and the Montgomery County of tomorrow. So they have undergone a review just like WMATA has done. And the WMATA study is already out there. And when we got a briefing at the committee about the WMATA work, WMATA basically told us that without changing their budget, not a dime in new funding, but simply changing their routes, they will be able to increase Metro bus ridership from between 5 to 10%. Without a dime of new investment. It's just building routes to connect people where they live and where they work. And it means rethinking and taking a look at our demographics and our growth areas. And so to your point, the county is currently doing that. We're going to be getting a briefing in 2025. I'd love to get your input once that becomes public, because I know change is sometimes hard. And it will mean that a route might not exist as it currently does. But the whole goal is to get more people on public transit and getting them to and from where they need to go. So that's going to be Ride-On Reimagined, and we can talk about that next year. Yeah. Transit-oriented development. We are almost built out in down county, which is why there's another conversation, which I'm not necessarily here to talk about, but I'll share my thoughts that we are in a housing crisis. We're in a housing crisis. It costs too much to live and buy a home in Montgomery County. You know what the average single-family house cost in the third quarter of 2024? $1 million. In the third quarter of 2024, $1 million. And so we need to figure out how we can make it more affordable for people. And I firmly believe that the best way to make housing more affordable is by having more housing. And so that is the conversation that we're engaging in. There is no roadmap just yet. If you are interested in that, the council had a briefing about 3 weeks ago. You can go online and you'll hear my thoughts and the thoughts of all of my colleagues. But it's part and parcel of the same point. So thank you, Jeff. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for coming to our meeting this evening. My name is Tim Goodfellow. I'm with the TAME Coalition, and we are working to remove the M83 highway from the master plan of highways right now. Retaining M83 in the master plans means that it could be funded and constructed at any time in the future by another administration, which would then take away resources from, fully functional BRT systems and other transit enhancements. So I just want to make a point and get your comment. On September 12th, the county's DOT did submit a letter to the planning board analyzing and giving their comments on the Master Plan of Highways update. And they recommended removal of M83 from the Master Plan of Highways. And they also stated that our ongoing investments in transit along 355 represent a more sustainable path forward for connecting Clarksburg, Germantown, and Gaithersburg. So I'd like to get your comments on that. I don't know if you're aware of that letter from DOT, but so the Master Plan of Highways will be coming to the T&E committee and the full council later this 2025.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate that question and appreciate TAME, and was pleased to celebrate Diane Cameron when she received an award last month for her advocacy, environmental stewardship and advocacy in getting rid of M83. So last year, when you asked the same question, right, and I think I was standing over there as opposed to over here, I said I would never give one dime to fund that project. And since then, the Master Plan of Highways has been taken up by the planning board. And so outside of the regular budgetary decision, there is a new decision that has emerged, whether or not to keep M83 in the Master Plan of Highways. I support removing M83 from the Master Plan of Highways. And the reason I support removing that is because I actually support removing a lot of projects in the Master Plan of Highways. And I have asked the planning board and council staff to do a more thorough review, because the Master Plan of Highways is basically built like a city in that there's layers and layers that have been built on top of it. But when you start digging down, you'll see remnants of ideas from past years and decades. There's a lot that is in the Master Plan of Highways that is never going to be built. There's no money for it, and in some instances, there's no need for some of those roads. M83 is definitely in the category of there is no money for it. And so I think the best thing to do is have an honest conversation with the community and say it's not going to be built. And so let's work on transit. Let's work on other things. And regarding BRT, I was a lone voice in the previous council when we were talking about BRT on 355. I previously mentioned that BRT on Rockville Pike, Wisconsin Avenue, Rockville Pike, Frederick Road, the 355 corridor is going to be broken into 3 segments. I was the lone voice actually advocating that we start up in Clarksburg, because if we're not having M83 and we're not immediately, we don't have the funds immediately to increase capacity on Observation Drive or a number of other projects, we have to help them. I don't know the last time some of you were up in Clarksburg area. They need some transportation relief. And so I strongly advocated that we start up there and work our way down. My colleagues and the county executive disagreed with me and said there would be more support and more funding available if we started down at the southern end and worked our way north. And so that's what's going to happen. But back to your question, we're in total agreement. I'm looking forward to the planning board making that decision. It will then come before the Transportation and Environment Committee, and I welcome your all comments as we deliberate that in committee and then full council. Thank you, Tim. Yeah.
So when you talked about the bikes and the bike storage,
Yeah.
several people I know have reported their bike locks being cut and their bikes being stolen. And so, do you have any plans to address that issue? Because I think it's very important.
Yeah. So thank you for that. So I'm just looking at my notes to be even more specific. The bike parking facility is currently planned for construction in the spring and summer of 2025 at the base of Garage 55, which is the Bonifant-Dixon, which is at Bonifant and Dixon. So it's right along the purple line. right? That's where it's going to be. And I think what you're speaking about is public safety more broadly. I just had attended a meeting just last week with the Chamber and the 3rd District Police Commander, with Council President Kate Stewart and some others to talk about public safety in the Central Business District specifically. And Commander Coquinos is doing a really good job, and we're going to continue working with him. And so there is more work to do, but I hear you on the need to make sure that our bikes are safe and secure. At the same time, WMATA, you might have heard, is also increasing its presence, its safety presence, specifically cracking down on bus fare evasion. And they're doing that particularly in DC, but I asked WMATA what bus routes are being impacted here, and there are about 5 different bus routes. It's on my email. I'll look at Val. We can circle back afterward. But WMATA got back to me, so if that's of interest to anybody, we know the bus routes where there's the highest fare evasion, and they're working to make sure that people pay their fair share of the fare, so that we can continue having a good WMATA budget, which I'll digress and say I'm a little nervous about, particularly with the next inhabitant of the White House. I'm not sure that public transit is going to be a top priority within their Department of Transportation, but we're going to work through that as well. So, hi, Tina.
Hi. Evan, I wanted your perspective as an elected official on the topic of the state is $1 billion short on the transportation funding. Yeah. I was in the Netherlands this spring. I was talking to our tour bus guide driver, and I said, I hardly see any big cars, SUVs around here. Everything's a tiny car. Why is that? He said, because every 6 months we have to pay a registration type fee on our vehicles, and it's by weight. So nobody wants to have a big car. And I was just wondering, would that be a suicide mission for state elected officials to try to do some kind of funding like that to raise transportation revenue?
So, I got a new car about 1.5 years ago. I had a Honda Fit for about 12 years, right? Nice and light. I now have a Chevy Bolt, which is heavier only because it has the battery, right? But same style car. There is, I believe, legislation that is being introduced, probably I think for a second time in a row, regarding registration by weight. I'm not sure if it's Delegate Stewart again. But you should take a look and see who might be introducing that, and I would be in favor of that. Yeah.
So I have a question about sidewalks. I love sidewalks. I want to put sidewalks everywhere.
Tina, do you want to give the mic?
Sorry.
You have the mic. Got it.
Am I not doing it right?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
I didn't see it. Sorry.
Okay. There are a number of objections that people raise to sidewalks, none of which I think are good objections. But one of them is that they have to take on the liability for removing snow, which I think is a silly one, because how often does a snowstorm fall? How often do we get snow, and how often does it last more than 24 hours? And so I tell the people, well, what do you have to worry about? And then the question is, though, can something be done, right? If it's rare that it happens, then can something be done? Montgomery County now obligates people to, which I think is generally a good idea, you have to clear the snow on your property, sidewalks, or sidewalks adjacent to your property. I'm wondering if something can be done whereby, because what I'd like to do is see more sidewalks and not have the snow thing hold up sidewalks. Is there some sort of solution that could be come up with, like maybe new sidewalks, maybe outside of downtown cores, could be exempt or something like that? I know this is crazy because I don't want people to be slipping and falling, but if the alternative is for 900 days of no snow and a sidewalk versus a sidewalk that won't exist. So, yeah.
I'm going to give you your third option. Lower the threshold for neighborhood support to build sidewalks.
Okay.
Right now it's too high.
Yeah.
And it was done that way by design. And I'll share with you. We're slipping and falling right back here. So my husband and I, we lived in Entown, Silver Spring on Eastern Avenue. We bought a single family home in Indian Spring right by the YMCA just inside the Beltway. Our neighbor, very nice guy. First time I met him was a few weeks after we moved in. And within 1 minute of introductions, he told me that neighbors had the audacity to want to build a sidewalk in front of our block. And I just kind of nodded and said, it was very nice to meet you. So I understand what some of those concerns are. So we're working actually with the Department of Transportation to look at those guidelines. There is other progress that's being made along those same, along that same thought. Speed bumps. Both of them, the regulations to install speed bumps and install sidewalks were essentially done so that nothing happened. They had incredibly high threshold of neighborhood buy-in and support. And so about a month ago, the Transportation Environment Committee reviewed a new regulation by the county for speed bumps that lowers that threshold so that a neighbor or two neighbors can't stop that neighborhood from being safe. So we're going to move that forward with speed bumps. It'll probably be approved, I think, in January or February, just going through another legal review. And then I think we're engaging in a conversation about sidewalks. But I'll also add, it was about 3 years ago that I passed the Shovel Our Sidewalk Act. And that Sean, that might have been your bill? Yeah, it was Sean's bill. It requires the county to shovel sidewalks on major thoroughfares where people walk on those sidewalks because they don't have cars. It's not leisurely walking. It's required walking to get to the bus, to get to the metro, to get to wherever they have to go. And so in that time, there might have only been one significant snowfall that actually required. So how moot some of this is, right, is a topic. But nonetheless, I agree with you. We need to do more, and I think we're definitely moving in that direction. Yeah, so it's a percentage. So basically, an applicant, a neighbor who wants to do either of these, either have a sidewalk or build or have a speed hump built, they basically have to go around and get a petition signed, or the Department of Transportation creates a petition that then gets signatures collected, right? Some form of that. And it was a very high threshold where you needed nearly 2/3, if not more, of the residents to sign support. And we know how hard it is for a neighbor to just open the door and talk to you, right? I know how hard that is when I go door knocking, right? And so to get people to proactively agree and sign their name to something, it has in recent years become an impediment. And so we're changing the dynamics, I think, to a simple majority, and it's not just based on the entire community, but it's based on people who sign it. But that regulation will be coming out. We'll share it with you all so you can take another look. I don't have the language in front of me, but it's lowering the threshold. In short, Val? Yeah. But, yeah.
So here are the steps for the sidewalk request process. So first you have to put in an initial request. Then there's a field investigation. Then if the field investigator deems it feasible, it's then placed in a project queue, which was something that Councilmember Glass was looking into because the project queue was very long. Yeah. So from there, there's a proposal that's formalized. It's sent back to the community. The community then has a comment period, followed by a public hearing, followed by a final comment period. Then a hearing officer reviews it. Then the MCDOT director reviews it.
Yes.
And then there's a notice of construction.
Right.
So that's the process.
There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you, Val. Well, the thing is, it doesn't take years to complete because people just give up, right? And that's why they're not built.
Well, it really should. Well, frankly, it really shouldn't. Frankly, it really shouldn't be that way. I have two questions.
Yep.
One, there are a lot of county residents who say we are in the black financially, meaning that we have a lot of, as Montgomery County is considered, a really wealthy county, and, Maryland is considered a really wealthy state. there are a lot of people who believe that, you know, we're just not taking action on it, on everything we want to do in terms of, you know, transit because we don't have, and that we really do have the funds to complete every single transit project that we want to do and every single thing that we want to do as a county, but we're holding it back because we're funneling money elsewhere. What do you say to those people who think that we're just holding back and there's not really an actual budget problem? And two, I'm working with I'm a fellow with a coalition of other, you know, youth, like urban sustainability activists, urban planners, called the Sustainable Development Solutions Network Youth Network, and we're all called Local Pathways Fellows, and we're trying to, you know, come up with projects to help make our cities more sustainable. And in my project proposal, I propose an accessibility audit that would do a thorough, you know, accessibility audit of all, you know, bus stops and crosswalks in Montgomery County, because there are many parts of the county where crosswalks and, you know, bus stops for ride-on and Metrobus aren't properly ADA accessible and do not meet ADA standards. How can we ensure that such an audit can be performed, and what would you be willing to work with me on such an audit and ensure that these are ADA accessible?
Yeah. So let me start with that one. So ADA accessibility is something that we talk a lot about, and on my first term on the council, I served on the Transportation and Environment Committee, and I also served on the Health and Human Services Committee. And it was through my discussions with the Health and Human Services community, and specifically the Commission for People with Disabilities, where they were expressing concern to me about some of our transportation infrastructure. Notably, they actually came to a meeting and said those floating bike lanes are a hazard. And I hadn't thought about it. But if you are walking around and you have a white cane and you're trying to navigate an area you thought you knew, or even if you don't know, you know, you're normally going to think here's a curb and there's two curbs and you're walking in between, and all of a sudden there are these impediments. And so we've had some conversations trying to figure that out. I understand and recognize the utility and the safety benefit to having a floating bike lane for sure. But we should not dismiss members of the disability community who cannot see that and don't know how to navigate around it. Two very real issues here. And so I welcome your audit committee or future further conversations. Loop me in because I think we need to figure this out because we need both people to be safe, right? The bike rider and someone with a visual impairment or some other types of disability. The other question I think is a harder question, and that's the budget. So right now the FY25 budget is $7.1 billion. Half of that goes to schools, then public safety, then debt, then healthcare, and then transportation. And the largest aspect of transportation is our ride-on bus, for sure. That is the single largest aspect of it. Most of the transportation programs that we think about in terms of infrastructure is in the capital budget, which is an equally large budget. And there's a lot more as a percentage for transportation in the CIP. In this last capital budget, we had to make some really tough choices because things have gotten really expensive. There have been a number of projects that were on the books for more than a decade, in some cases more than 20 years, like the Capitol Crescent Trail Tunnel in Bethesda underneath Wisconsin Avenue. What started as a $15 or $20 million project 15 years ago now ballooned to nearly $90 million. Nobody could defend it. The county executive took it out of the budget. No council member defended it because there was no way to make the math work. And that was just for one tunnel. The Forest Glen Tunnel, something I long advocated for when I was a resident of downtown Silver Spring, to make sure that people on the east side of Georgia Avenue by the hospital could safely get across Georgia Avenue to the metro station. So let's build a tunnel. That, I think, ballooned up to about $30 million or so. And the math wasn't mathing, right? As the kids say these days. And then I'll give you two more examples. One was the Goldsboro bike lane in Bethesda. Lots of support for it. I support it in concept. A very steep road, people driving very quickly, not enough safe space for pedestrians, let alone bicyclists. So we need to make sure it's safer in your neck of the woods. It did not advance in the budget this year because the 1.5 mile project was going to cost about $18.5 million per mile. From an equity perspective, there were other projects in other parts of the county. And so the county executive did not advocate for it, nor did any council member vote to support it. The last item gets to back the housing and some other aspects. This is the one item in the capital budget that we were able to salvage. The county executive zeroed it out, but the Transportation and Environment Committee advocated for it and it got funding back in. And it is in Kensington, and it's the extension of Summit Avenue, which goes from basically in the heart of Kensington, where the Chipotle is, and where that shopping center, where the original Java Nation is, right? The reason we supported that project, a road extension, is because that road extension is going to open up for new stores, new housing, a new park, and new transportation options. So more people in what is a commercial area who will be able to utilize all the different aspects of those transportation opportunities and create more economic opportunity and more housing. And because it was literally a complete package of economic, transportation, and housing, we moved that forward, and that's in the budget. But right now, I'll end with this. Just today at the council, for those of you who have the time, we got a briefing from the finance and budget departments with their economic indicators. Things are looking really good. We are exceeding almost all metrics in terms of property tax, in terms of income tax, and our reserve level is now higher than 13% when we have a goal of having it at least at 10%. Those are all good, but a sentiment I shared and a number of my colleagues shared was about the incoming administration and how all of that can go sideways when any number of our neighbors who work for the federal government are told they no longer have jobs or that their jobs are now moving to Oklahoma City. There are 96,000 federal employees who live in Montgomery County. And if a percentage of them, even a small percentage of them, lose their livelihood or are shipped somewhere else, that has a lot of downstream consequences. So we might be in good financial footing right now, but we need to protect ourselves from what may be coming over the next few months and years. Okay.
Very quickly, thank you, Councilmember Glass, for your time tonight. Since housing and budgets have both come up, I know the planning board and it's in the attainable housing plan and other blog posts I saw from planning has discussed that housing supply is connected to our financing issues, attracting more residents, more efficient
Thank you, Mike. So Governor Moore, I think, released a report last year or this year, it's still 2024, citing the fact that our housing is inhibiting economic growth, right? The same aspect that you're citing, and that we need more housing so that more people can live here, move here, and work here. And I absolutely agree with that. It's the reason why just 3 weeks ago or last month, I introduced a piece of legislation about impact taxes. It is a very simple and detailed proposal that most people are unaware of. But right now, if you want to build any new housing, and let's just talk about multifamily apartments. If you want to build multifamily apartments, you go through all the permitting, you get all the reviews. The minute you get approved, you have to pay those impact taxes, which go to schools and roads. You have to pay those impact taxes within 6 to 12 months of your approval, right? So that means as you're financing your project, you have to encumber those impact fees, which are typically millions of dollars, and that becomes part of your loan package, thus making it more expensive because you are paying interest on those loans to pay impact taxes. So the legislation I introduced simply flips it and says you do not have to pay impact taxes until you get your occupancy permit. You've built it. Now, as people are about to move in and actually have an impact, then you charge the impact fee, right? And what that will then do is allow the developer and the banks to save hundreds of thousands of dollars per project, if not more, because they are not paying interest on the taxes and fees that they've paid for simply building those projects. There will be a public hearing. I'm sorry, we already had our public hearing last week. Lots of favorable support from the industry. Haven't heard very much from people or organizations, but again, it's a very technical issue. Unless you're balancing your own budget and you're doing the financing for your project, you're not thinking about it. But it is real, and it will save hundreds of thousands of dollars per project. And anytime that we can reduce the cost of housing, it's a good thing. And so I hope you can support that in various ways. Washington Business Journal wrote a pretty good article about it, and Bethesda Magazine, MoCo 360, included that in a broader conversation about impact taxes. And while there might be another conversation about how much taxes should be charged, the fact is we are charging them. So if we're going to continue charging them, let's do it in a smart way where we do not reduce our revenue. We still get the same amount of money for our schools and our roads. We just time it differently so that it's cheaper to build housing.
Okay, all right. So hi, Evan.
Hi.
It was good to see you. Well, thank you for coming to speak this past July. It's always good to see you around Montgomery County. So when I heard the news about Wamata is requiring some officers trying to check on the bus passengers just to make sure that they are paying the fares, but however, this might be concerned for low-income residents, especially for people with disabilities, because like seniors, people with disabilities, and the kids under 18, they get to ride the bus for free all day, which is good because I know it costs $1 for ride on, and the people in Metrobus always making sure that they are being paid. Because I know it's just $2 because I see a lot of people sometimes they're just concerned. Is it gonna affect the ride on just to check the people who are paying fares as usual? But also some people were asking me a question about the purple lines because when I was visiting some of my friends at University of Maryland, College Park, people were asking when the purple lines is going to be finished, but I just told them this could be done either 2027 or 2028 because purple line has been huge challenging for everyone to figure out where they're going to take it because it's been taking up to like 7 years because Governor Larry Hogan launched Purple Line 2021. Governor Larry Hogan launched Purple Line in 2017, but however, he paused the construction in 2020 with a federal judge. This is the big concern that everybody's been feeling, and this is why we need Purple Line to get done as much as possible.
If you allow me, I'm going to amend your statement. Larry Hogan botched the Purple Line, right? It was his contracts that resulted in the situation we found. He botched the Purple Line. And so I actually did earlier this year. We went over to Prince George's County and they unveiled the the trains, the cars that are going to be used, and it was awesome. And I actually did a little TikTok and Instagram reel on it, and it got a lot of attention, but it was mostly from UMD students dunking on it because they know it's a problem or they feel it's a problem and it's disrupted campus. But by 2027, it should be operational. I shared with you the statistics already. I'll read it one more time. As of September 30th, 72% of the Purple Line has been completed. The project as a total. That was by September 30th. And then once it's actually done, it will actually take about 6 to 9 months for them to test it. So it will be operational. It will be ready. No more work is going to be done, but it will take that long for them to make sure that it's safe. And so we'll get to that when we get to that. Back to fare enforcement. So the general manager of WMATA, Randy Clark, has made it his mission to make sure people pay their fair share. The metro system over the last 2 years or so has been at real risk of totally collapsing because of funding, and he has cited the numbers of that fare evasion alone is a large percentage, and he has been working to fix that. And so they've done a lot of work at the metro rail level, and now he's working on the metro bus level. And I appreciate you noting that we already allow kids to ride free, seniors to ride free, and people with disabilities. And one of the very first things I did, which predated Sean, but another ACT member and leader, Pete Tomeo, for those of you who remember Pete, was my original transportation environment staffer. We worked to make buses free for all kids all the time, which was not in practice. And that once we made buses free for all kids all the time, youth ridership increased nearly 58%. So when you give them access, they're going to ride it. And when the pandemic happened, fares were free. And I pushed really hard to keep them free. And where we are now was a compromise between the county executive and essentially me and the council. That fare is only $1. But that $1 is only about 10% of the cost of a ride. So we're already subsidizing 90% through our budget. And so don't let anyone make you think that the fare alone is making or breaking the system. But in a system like WMATA that is in desperate need of cash, they have determined that fare evasion is hurting the system, right? But here in Montgomery County, we are not necessarily doing that with Ride-On. We operate a little differently, and I'll wait until we get that Ride-On Reimagined study to maybe dive deeper and see if there is a problem with our Ride-On ridership payments and fare collection. But we can have that conversation at a later point. So,
Thank you.
okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Evan. Appreciate it. Sticking around.
Thank you, Sean. It's been a good year. We have more things to do, and we continue to need your advocacy. Most, if not all, of what I just shared and the good news is because of you. And not everybody on the council or not everybody in politics is like me. My husband and I, when we were living in downtown Silver Spring, we had one car. I actually ran for council in 2014 without a car. And we had to get a second car in our family when I ran for council in 2018 because I was running at large. And there was no way for me to get to Silver Spring, to Bethesda, to Gaithersburg, and to Olney in one day. And so your advocacy is helping people understand the need for transit. And despite the budget woes, either at WMATA, at the state level, or whatever may come at the county, I'm going to continue prioritizing this because it's good for people now and it's good for our future. So thank you for everything that you guys do. Have yourselves a good night. Happy holidays.